business that we're in is not so much the cattle business as it is the people business. And that goes for the commercial marketing side. That goes for the purebred marketing side of the industry.
Well, summer video sale season is upon us, and that was Kyle Shobe with Superior Livestock and Lewistown Livestock Auction. We'll hear more from Kyle today, diving into the early summer market, what producers can expect in Superior Livestock's upcoming Corn Belt Classic video sale, and throughout the rest of the summer. All of that and much more right here on Next Year Country. We'd like to thank BNSF Railway for providing today's episode. BNSF is a critical link that connects consumers with the global marketplace. For over 175 years, they've played a vital role in building and sustaining the nation's economy. We appreciate their support of the agriculture industry and for sponsoring Next Year Country. Thanks for joining us again on Next Year Country. I'm Colton Young from the Northern Ag Network, joined by the Ag Banter brothers, my fellow ag broadcasters, Colter Brown and Andy Schwab. But before we dive in today's episode, guys, I have to congratulate you. Last week, you took the podcast on the road. I was a little sad listening to it that I wasn't a part of it. But, Colter, I'll start with you. Talk about the Wyoming stock growers and what it was like having Next Year Country on the road.
Well, I think a lot of people thought that we fired you, Colton, and just said, he's off. He can't do the podcast anymore. But no, we appreciate you covering the home front so Andy and I could go to Cody and do the Wyoming Stock Growers Convention. Boy, I was surprised there at the level of optimism in the room. I mean, I got to drive clear north to south across Wyoming after that, and boy, there's some tough conditions. Yeah. And so to feel that level of optimism despite the drought that we're fighting here, it was heartwarming. And of course, when you got a market like this, it's easy to be optimistic even in the face of some challenges. But was a lot of fun. I thought it turned out pretty good. Luckily, we had some good guests to make up for the hosts.
Yeah, absolutely. And when people were asking about you, Colton, they really were. Yeah, they said, "Who's the other guy again that you have on there?" No, I'm kidding. It was good. 30 minutes from my hometown. It was nice to see some family and friends that are in the area. So. It was, I too had the opportunity to travel to Casper on that weekend for a different auction, and it was amazing to see the different levels of green grass and brown grass across the Bighorn Basin, down the Bighorn Front, and that stretch between the Casper and Shoshone that everybody dreads, but certainly interesting to see how dire of moisture those guys are, even after a little bit of moisture that they received the previous week. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. They had a good start to their convention as well, talking with potential candidates that are vying for both the House of Representatives seat, then also the governor seat that's going to be up for election later this year. Of course, it's pretty much in primary season for Wyoming that they kind of decide those winners typically, but that'll be coming up in August. So it was good for those producers to hear directly from those candidates and, see what they have for agriculture.
Before we get any deeper, can we agree to put the kibosh on the line Ag Banter Brothers?
I thought it was pretty good.
Oh, man.
Well, I was trying to think. I was like, okay, it was between Banter Brothers or Speculating Sisters. So you should be thankful
I guess
that I
those
went
are
with
the
the
only
Banter
options.
Brothers. Well, I just have to say, last week listening to the episode, it was awesome because I was really just a true listener. Of course, you guys were sending interviews back from the Stock Growers Convention, so I was able to hear what Jim McGagna had to say and heard from Gene Copenhaver, I believe, with NCBA. And it was great insight, but just listening to the conversation the producers had and the way they really dove into this format, and they just told it how it is. And, they talked about fire concerns within the last few years. Of course, drought, another major concern this year, but they were as optimistic as any one of them could be. So I thought it was great. You guys did a good job, and I would say it's good to be back and settled down. But next week you're back on the road again. Of course, Montana Farm Bureau Federation seems like the other side of the country up in Kalispell, going to have their summer conference. You guys are headed up to that, and then as we'll talk later on today, Superior Livestock's kicking off their big summer video sales season. Livestock Marketing Association has their convention. There's just a lot going on here as we head into official summertime.
Yeah, really, from here to the 4th of July, it's almost nonstop. It was nice to get a little breather here. But yeah, Andy and I will be in the Flathead next week to attend the Montana Farm Bureau Summer Conference, which is always a great time. A ton of good information there. Actually, Andy's got to participate in one of the committee meetings.
Yeah, voluntold.
I think it was.
Exactly.
I should have showed up to the county meetings. I may have been able to get out of this, but I'm happy to serve.
Ricky.
Thank Ricky.
I'm happy to serve.
Oh, that's funny. Well, yeah, like I said, Superior Livestock is going to have their Corn Belt Classic coming up next week. Lots to talk about with Kyle Shobe on the air today, but let's kick it over into the headlines.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the headlines are sponsored by the Montana Farm Bureau Federation. They're leading Montana agriculture towards a future with a prosperous ag economy and thriving rural communities. Become an advocate with Montana Farm Bureau Federation to help protect the future of Montana agriculture. Learn more at mfbf.org. Well, the big news this week, of course, was the information coming out kind of late last week is New World Screwworm has entered into the United States. It was first detected in a county in southern Texas, and now we're seeing it in border town of Texas and New Mexico. They found it in a dog in New Mexico, and additional cases have been found throughout Texas, and it's just it seems like it's starting to spread pretty quickly.
Yeah, it certainly is concerning for our industry, and boy, you just look at what it's done to the market here. I mean, we talked last week about the limit up day and the feeders, and then we were down hard on Monday, and I think if it continues like this, where it's in the headlines every single day, another case, unless it suddenly surprises us and moves way north or east or whatever, I think the market's going to become kind of numb.
I think that was my initial reaction. One, of course, it's obviously an animal health concern, and we have to feel for the guys down south that are right next to the border, and it's an active fight for them. But I think to see the announcement, it was almost a breath of fresh air for the markets to say, okay, we know it was coming. Now it's here. Now what? And it's finally we're at the time to see the USDA eradication efforts, see those action plans come through, and to see limit up in the futures that next day. I thought it was kind of just a confirmation that this is an issue, but we're not going to lose everything that we've gained in this last year and a half.
And probably the bigger news of the New World Screwworm that it is mostly in the south that we're seeing this, but the impacts that we're going to see here in the Northern Ag Territory are the restrictions of imports. The Montana Department of Livestock came out on Friday and said, we are halting the imports of live animals from those affected areas. You're going to have to go through certain restrictions and quarantines before. And as you'll hear from Kyle Shobe in a little bit, it might not affect the producers of Montana, the livestock, the cattle producers more so. But you talk about these horse guys. There's a lot of times that horses are coming and going from Texas and all the way back here to Montana, and so it is going to be interesting on those guys. Another news that came out this week, we also heard that Canada is restricting the imports of cattle coming out of, actually livestock in general. They're restricting livestock coming out of the affected states as well, as long as they have a 21-day quarantine pattern in there as well. And oddly enough, you mentioned this, Colton, earlier, that Mexico has now shut off imports of live cattle
ironic, right?
From the U.S.
It's like the Browns trading all of their good football players and deciding we can't draft another one.
Good point. But you mentioned Canada, and to me, that's where my antenna raised, that if this thing moves north, and if it gets, I don't know, if it gets Colorado, Wyoming, if we start getting to that level, now we've got a high level of concern, I think, not just from the pest, but if Mexico shuts if Canada shuts U.S. cattle out of their market, that is going to affect producers here. We do sell a lot of cattle north. So to me, that's the biggest market risk here. And hopefully I'm overblowing it, honestly. But really, this shouldn't be a big market issue. This is a management issue that is going to be costly for affected producers in the South there, but shouldn't have a big effect on the market. If anything, it should serve to keep supplies tight for longer and support these prices. But we know markets don't like uncertainty, so we'll just watch and see what happens.
Yeah, ride the wave like we always do, and hopefully it's always on the high side. Well, another news story, of course, that we've heard in the recent past is the American Prairie having the bison allotments rescinded from the Bureau of Land Management. Now, as you can imagine, we anticipated to see this, but there are lawsuits being filed saying from American Prairie and some folks on the American Prairie side from the Western Watersheds Project that are coming out and trying to sue the federal government as they're, trying to not allow this to happen. They're claiming that there's not the proper process done with this, but I mean, it seems pretty cut and dry to me where the Bureau or the Department of Interior came out and said the Taylor Grazing Act says this is for production livestock, not the free grazing bison that the American Prairie was trying to, push on us all.
Have you read the Taylor Grazing Act? I sat down yesterday and read it, and I about had an aneurysm trying to follow it. But I did pull something that I thought was kind of interesting, and like I said, it was a lot of 1934 language, so it was hard to follow through, and I didn't use AI. I did it all by myself. I'm proud of that. But it does say in there that the Secretary of the Interior shall take into account the extent to which such districts yield public benefits over and above those accruing to the users of the forage for livestock production. And so I thought that was kind of my big takeaway, is that it's up to the Secretary of the Interior. He can decide if it's a public benefit versus a production livestock decision.
Well, and I think there's two key words in there, Colton, right at the very end: livestock production. And that's sort of what's kind of blown up across social media after the decision was finalized by the Interior Department, that it's an effort to get bison off the landscape. That's not at all what's happening here. It's got nothing to do with the species, really. It's about livestock production, and that is the purpose of these public grazing allotments. I mean, I think none of us were surprised to see the lawsuit that came out this week. I mean, this deal has been going on for, 9 years maybe since it was first proposed. I bet it goes on a lot longer. So it's just one of those issues, but I think that's the key, and I think that's what the Interior Department will try to defend in court, that this is about livestock production on public grazing land.
Absolutely. And then as we wrap up here, the House had a hearing last week with the U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. Brooke Rollins had a busy week last week. She
had a great week. She had a busy one.
She may have to get some hair color going if she hasn't already, because it was certainly a gray hair week for her last week, I feel like, because I can't remember, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, she had to sit in front of all the lawmakers and try and get them to agree to pass the budget that she proposed. There was always, as always, there was fiery testimony between the secretary and some of the Democrats that were trying to get as much money for SNAP and WIC programs, and Secretary Rollins is trying to prove why they need to cut back on some of the spending that they've seen over the years, that they don't feel as though it's kind of great benefits to producers.
Well, you could just sure tell that it's election season with some grandstanding that happening, and some of the lawmakers taking the ag secretary for task. Boy, it was interesting to listen to Angie Craig and Rollins' interaction there.
Little stepbrother feel, like, shut your mouth, I'm talking.
Yeah. Honestly, I thought Rollins handled herself well and didn't lose her temper in there, but yeah, I guess it's just part of the election cycle. I mean, the House did finalize the ag appropriations budget last week as well, so there's some important research dollars in there, but yeah, it was certainly interesting to watch, and interesting to me that Andy is handing out beauty tips to the Secretary of Agriculture.
Hair dye.
I don't know.
Not expecting this podcast to go that direction.
Speculating sisters. It sounds more and more every day.
And I'm going to say, I don't know if Brooke Rollins needs any beauty tips, especially from me. But yeah, I can certainly feel that she probably gained some gray hairs from that.
You bet. Well, the highlight of this week's episode is going to be getting to hear from Lewistown livestock auction owner Kyle Shobe, and we're going to do that right after we hear from our sponsor, Western Ranch Supply, Montana owned and operated. They've been proudly serving farmers and ranchers with quality products and trusted expertise for over 70 years. They're trusted by generations because they're built by generations. Western Ranch Supply.
Well, our guest today, livestock auctioneer and owner of Lewistown Livestock. He's a Superior Livestock Rep, singer, songwriter, and, of course, last but not least, your 2010 World Livestock Auctioneer Champion, Mr. Kyle Shobe. Kyle, it sure is a pleasure to have you join us here today. How are things looking over in central Montana?
I don't know there's anywhere in the country that looks a whole lot better than a 100-mile radius around our area here. And, boy, we've been so grateful for some good moisture over the last couple of weeks, talking to a lot of our customers and close friends. It's just obviously not just $1 million rain. This has kind of been a lot more value than that. And it's virtually stopped all conversations about marketing sizable numbers of pairs that we were starting to kind of broach the subject of there for a little while as we got into the middle and into May when it was getting so hot. So things are great as far as the weather goes, and what a tremendous time to be in the cattle business.
Well, it sure is. I'm curious, what did you receive at your place there for rain over the last week?
Yeah, I don't think Lewistown specifically and kind of the surrounding area was maybe quite that quite that much, but I didn't see the exact report, but I think we got a good 1.5 inches to 3/4 out of that first burst. And then we've been catching some kind of rains, timely rains here, just every day or two, some thunderstorm activities. And so, yeah, I mean, the country is starting to look good. We did have some frost there in late May, kind of set some alfalfa back. And I know we're a little bit concerned about some hay crop, but I think at the end of all this, there's going to be we're going to be all right. And it you know, if we can cut hay in central Montana, it kind of ripples through the rest of the state. And if we can get through, it'll be we're still probably, I don't know, minimum of 2 weeks out of seeing a swath or anywhere close, and maybe closer to 3 or 4 weeks for some folks. But we'll just have to see what happens there.
Well, you're exactly right, Kyle. The rest of the state kind of depends on Lewistown to produce a lot of the hay for us. So glad that it's looking good. But before this rainstorm, I'm curious to what you were seeing. Were you starting to see more pairs moving, more cows being cold hard, or was it just a conversation that if this doesn't turn soon, we're going to have to?
Yeah, that was probably more the latter. You know, at that time, as we got into May, you know, we had some hot days, we had some dry weather and windy conditions, and just kind of, you know, we're all in this business together. I think we've been through these things before, and maybe there was a little bit of flashback to 2021, 2022, just how the spring was starting and not really finishing well for us, and we didn't market any sizable groups, but you certainly started having those conversations.
I think it was quite evident in your sale that you had this week, and I know you talked about it in the sale report, that there was definitely less, cow-calf pairs in the coal market. Still a strong number and strong market as you switch to your summer schedule, but definitely eased a lot of those concerns and conditions for many of the producers in that area.
Yeah, we had good numbers this week, very consistent with what we see the second week of June. We go to an every other week scenario just because the numbers do tend to shrink. Most cattle are turned out. We've kind of cleaned up most of those cows that are coming out of production, and virtually all the feeder cattle. There's just not a whole lot left to market other than a few packages that have just kind of been held on to, and so. But again, we're seeing pretty consistent patterns with our numbers straight across. I will say year to date our numbers are up, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the market naturally drawing more cattle to town, less people maybe holding on to kind of those extra cattle, just capturing this market on the later bred animals, some of those extra feeders that they might sometimes turn out to grass for a while. Those have a lot of those I think have come to town just because this market's been so solid for so long.
I think that was definitely expected as we were heading into this year, and you can't blame the producers for doing that. And we'll dive a lot into some market fundamentals and standpoint, but before we get into that and before we dive into Superior Livestock's video sale coming up, Kyle, I'm curious just from my perspective. Of course, I've known you and known your family for many years in the auction industry, but I'm curious when did it start for you in the livestock marketing business at LLA, and then what kind of led you to buying the stockyards there and now a rep for Superior Livestock?
Well, I made my first dollar in the pen back here when I was 5, I think. I came and I'd work some of these sheep sales and was always around the cattle sales. My dad did the radio reports back then for Lewistown Livestock back in the early and mid 80s. So I spent a lot of time around the market back then, and then I worked here when I was in high school. Spent a lot of time here, just kind of throughout, growing up, and then when we moved back to Lewistown after my wife and I finished up our college careers in Wyoming, we ended up back in Lewistown in the mid 2000s, and that's when I started kind of more full time working in selling cattle and in the livestock trade more and more, and so. Yeah, I mean, that's getting to be quite a few years ago now. We're working on our 6th year as owners here at LLA, and it's, we've kind of seen in these short 6 years, we've seen all kinds of market conditions, weather conditions, all of the variables that kind of affect the livestock markets. We've seen a lot of them, and it's been quite a ride here for 6 years, but we've been very thankful.
I could imagine. So when did it start with Superior Livestock? I'm sure, competing in the World Championship and having the belt buckle sure helps a lot to do so, but has that always been kind of a dream of yours to be one of the livestock video reps and kind of go down that route as well?
when I got serious about auctioneering, of course, my dad, Jason, is an auctioneer. I grew up in our family auction business, much like your family's, Colton. And, we had, back in those days, there was a lot more farm auctions. There was more estate auctions. Like, we had auctions, once a week, it seemed like, in the summertime. Sometimes they'd be downtown, sometimes they'd be out of town. But I grew up learning how to auctioneer kind of from Dad and from the other auctioneers that would work with us. But when I really started getting serious about it, there was 3 guys that I really listened to in addition to those local auctioneers. And one of them was obviously Ralph Wade, who's been with Superior, virtually since day one. The other 2 was John Corey and Max Olvera, and all of which I've had a chance to get to sell beside and get to become friends with, which is just incredible. But really, Ralph had, back in those days, videotape out called Auctioneering My Way. And it was a lot of footage from a Superior sale. And, it was kind of ironic. There was a lot of Lewistown cattle on that particular footage from that kind of educational tape. And so, when I was really, really trying to hone my craft, so to speak, at the Auctioneer Chant and really getting serious about developing my own style, Ralph was certainly one of those that was very pivotal there. And I hadn't really met him at that point. I didn't know him or anything like that. But as time has gone on, we became reps almost immediately when we bought Lewistown Livestock. Lyle Allen, who had this before us, had a good relationship with Northern, and I've always had a good relationship with the Goggins family and Ty and Bill and the boys in Billings, but it just felt like a more natural fit to be in the Superior camp. A lot of producers in central Montana have been selling on Superior since some of those first years. And so this Corn Belt Classic that's coming up next week will feature a lot of central Montana cattle that the High Tech Marketing Group have done such a great job of putting together, for, 35 years. And then I had some contacts there just through my association with the Livestock Marketing Association, very good friends with Charlie Cummings, Bailey Ballou, and those guys that had been working with Superior. Joe Lichty, who has been with Superior for many, many years as well, was also one of those that I had just had some contact with. So I knew some folks kind of that were already, in the system, and it just kind of seemed like a natural fit. And so when we bought Lewistown, that was kind of the direction we went, because I've always felt that we don't want to just be a fixed facility livestock auction market. I think that what we do here fills very important needs. It's very critical to our local community, but from a marketing standpoint, I want to be able to roll up into your ranch and say, hey, how can we help you market cattle? Can we bring them to the livestock auction? Can we put them on the video? Do you want us to sell them direct? Having a smorgasbord of marketing options has kind of been the goal all along. And so Superior is an important facet of that we've really been able to develop here over time. And then, to kind of tie that up, just the opportunity to auctioneer there. I guess you could say it's a dream come true in a lot of ways, but it's also something that I worked really hard to get to that level, to be in that capacity. And it is work, I'll tell you that. Trying to maintain a market and make sure we're within the acceptable parameters of a market when you're marketing, 300,000 head of cattle in the course of 5 days. It's a very, very grueling thing to be behind that mic. But, it's also rewarding from the standpoint is that we're leveraging the auction method of marketing to maximize the return for these producers.
Kyle, you mentioned the number of cattle from central Montana that always sell on that Corn Belt Classic sale. We can always count on there being a big contingent. Why is that? Because I always think, that Corn Belt Classic, it's kind of the first real big video sale of the season, and a lot of years we're uncertain about what it's going to look like. This year we're sure it's going to be good. We're just wondering how good it's going to be. So how did that get to be such a Lewistown-centric sale for Montana?
High Tech Marketing Group, which is Roger Gaines, Bob Stone, and some others, Steve Frericks, who's since retired and such. But those guys, came in here and had a new package, had a new idea. The Superior model, we think of these video auctions now as just kind of second nature. You don't have to explain what they are. most folks understand what they are and how they work, and because they've been implemented for close to 40 years. But you think back to those times. I mean, this was a very cutting edge technology. There were cattle. Montana generally has been a very private treaty state. If you go and you gentlemen spend time in South Dakota, I think is a state that, I mean, they wouldn't dream of selling one in the country. Everything goes to the livestock auction, but there's a livestock auction on every street corner there, just about, right? So it's just a little bit of a different culture there versus here, where a lot of these cattle are being sold on a contract and being shipped in the fall right off the ranch. Well, the Superior model has allowed the private, kind of the best of both worlds there, where you're still shipping them off the ranch, but we're leveraging the true price discovery of the auction method of marketing, maximizing that price value at the front end. And I think that's such a critical piece in this. And so, Colter, when you ask how did this start or why is this, things happen and have success for long enough, it becomes something that just is. And there's been enough success in this sale setting the bar for that summer market for so many years that it just continues that wheel just continues to turn. I can't speak to it exactly because I wasn't here in the business back in those early days, but I think it was a good marketing product, and it had some folks that had boots on the ground here that were willing to sell that product, and then the producers here that were willing to put their trust in this new technology and this cutting edge marketing style, and all of a sudden it becomes tradition.
Well, and I think one of the things Superior does really well is pushing the value-added cattle and the additional things that the producers do to market their cattle. I'm thinking the programs that we put in, or being able to advertise those genetics really well. And that seems to make a difference. I'm watching on the catalog, and those with all the right buttons, boy, they will explode, especially if they're northern cattle.
That's for sure. And maybe in this market that we're seeing right now, maybe we don't see those programs magnifying those premiums quite as much, just because this market is so strong kind of across the board. But it's in those tougher times where you see those value-added programs maybe shining exceptionally well. Now, I will say, I think something that Superior did very, very well back in the early 90s was that they created kind of a standard for animal health protocol, and at least not. And they obviously had good advice from, I think, Texas A&M and some of the other animal health professionals that they had surrounded themselves with to kind of develop these vaccination programs. But not only was it good for the cattle, it's also good for marketing and good for the next guy in the chain. And let's face it, we've got to remember, as a cow-calf producer, there's other people that are going to have to deal with these cattle, the health of these cattle, the vigor of these cattle. So it's important that they go on and are successful for the next guy in line. That's what makes him come back and want to buy them again. And so I think when you talk about value-added programs, we tend to think about some of those natural programs and the NHTC type stuff that kind of came about years ago, along with the GAP programs and the all-natural and things. I think at the core of that is the vaccination protocols, and maybe we see it now more than ever, just because this market is where it is. But buyers are certainly paying attention to things like health a lot closer. And so, are they going to give a little more money for calf with fall shots at him, or with the full vaccination protocol? It's most likely that he will. It's not a one-size-fits-all for any of those value-added programs. And what we tell a lot of our customers with regards to this conversation is that it has to work in your program. You can't do something that just doesn't fit. And there's folks that, are running in grazing associations, or they're running out in big country. There's no way to gather those cattle in to put a fall vaccination in them before shipping day. You know what? That's okay. That's just what it is. But, as we go forward, I think there's certain things that we can strive to do with those value addeds. And you're right, Colter. I think Superior has done a very good job of leveraging those particular value added programs.
Well, I think I was actually talking to you last summer, Kyle, after one of the sales, and I just had a kind of an off-topic question, but it was, what is the value of some of those programs? Is it really worth it? And I think you said something to the note that if you aren't a part of those programs, Superior, like you mentioned, they've built such a platform, large platform on animal health. They have the buyers there. And if you don't have those programs that some of those buyers are looking for, you're just narrowing your buying opportunity. And I thought that really stood out to me because it was like, what is the value added to those in a market like last year? And I'm sure we'll see it again this year where you don't necessarily see a large gap from the program cattle versus just the all-natural or the clean cattle that aren't on a whole lot of the programs. But by having some of those programs, there are select buyers looking for them specifically. So by not having it, you're just narrowing down your audience pretty quick.
We want as many bidders participating in the market as absolute possible on every one of our lots that we'll sell on the video, and we have that conversation continually. So how do we put more bidders in the seats? Well, sometimes it is you can have a direct correlation to some of these value-added programs that open up the doors to some of these folks that wouldn't necessarily be there looking if you weren't a part of those.
Well, let's dive into next week's sales. Superior is going to host their Corn Belt Classic in Sioux City, Nebraska, the 16th through the 18th. Looking at the catalog here, of course, like we mentioned, there's a lot of Lewistown and Central Montana cattle coming through. What are you expecting to see just on a high level, Kyle? Of course, this market is rather strong. Our region, we've seen a lot of much-needed moisture here in the last few weeks, but overall, what's the expectation as we head into the summer season?
Well, we've got to remember that we've got two factors at play here, and it's basic economics, supply and demand. And you guys talk about the cattle inventory a lot on your reports. You're spot on. I mean, it's very true. Our numbers are not exceptionally high right now. The demand on the backside of this is very, very good. And you talk to a lot of the folks that are a lot smarter than I am, but they continue to talk about this being a demand-driven market. And I think that's something we can be very grateful for, that the consumer is believing in our product. But a lot of that comes back to a lot of the work that's been done over the last 30 years promoting beef. And, we got to remember that at some point that does filter back to complement the entire market complex. As far as next week goes, I expect this thing to be strong. How strong? I don't know, guys. I mean, we know this thing can't get higher and higher and higher forever and ever, but it's showing just some very, very solid strength. What we have to remember, and I think this is a big message that we talk to a lot of our friends, a lot of our customers about, we can't get greedy. As a producer in this market, we can't be greedy. I realize it takes every dollar that we can when you talk about the expenses and the unknowns and all the risk factors that are involved in doing what we do. But this thing is way beyond what any of us in the marketing world ever thought was possible. And enjoy it, take care of business, put some away for a rainy day. But I think as we look forward, it's green lights as far as I can tell.
Kyle, one of my favorite things that you do in your reports on the radio or on the website is always kind of putting it in perspective like that and reminding us, here's what it did last year. And boy, I mean, even you look at the cow market right now, and it's not crazy for them to get up to close to $2 a pound right now. It wasn't that long ago they were worth 50 cents, and just across the board it's that strong. When you put it in perspective, you realize just how good times are and how nice it is to finally have some profitability restored to the cow-calf operator.
Well, it's long overdue, and that's going to ripple through a lot of different things. It's going to ripple through our small communities. It already is, but obviously agriculture is the anchor of Lewistown, Montana. It's the anchor of a lot of rural communities in the West, but especially here in the state of Montana. And I think I do a lot of messaging, a lot of training, and a lot of just having conversations with local business folks that are outside of our industry, because I think it's important that everybody understands how important ag production is to what our communities are, to our community identity. And that's what makes Montana what it is. But it also ripples through the real estate market. It ripples through some of these other things that affect what we do in agriculture. But if production ag is profitable, just think about the possibilities when it comes to land acquisition and when it comes to the next generation wanting to come back. It really changes the conversation when you can be profitable in this business. And I think it's remarkable. We're long overdue, and everybody's hoping for some sustainability in this. And I think somewhere here there's an equilibrium. As I said, you just can't get higher and higher and higher. But until the consumer puts their foot down and says we can't pay that, this thing is just going to continue to be solid, I think. Now, you've got these external factors that we can't account for, and anybody that wants to predict the market, good luck. I'm certainly not saying that this, not trying real hard to be optimistic and positive, but yet we've also got to be realistic. But remember that somewhere behind us, where we came from, it wasn't. You mentioned 50-cent cows. You're absolutely right, Colter. It was not that long ago. Cull cows, the best cull cows, are bringing 50 to 60 cents. It wasn't that long ago where a lot of us would have been real happy with a 6-weight steer bringing 250.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a chance we'll be double that this summer on some of these cattle. Just remember, there's profitability somewhere between where we were and where we are now. May not feel good if this thing wants to back up at some point, but we have to remember that there is profitability to be had. And I think that greed factor, we just kind of got to keep that in check on a personal level to make sure that we're making good business decisions.
Talk about some of those external factors. Drought factor is going to be a big one, of course, for a lot of producers for selling. But what are you hearing from the buyers? I know it seems like when you're looking at some of the other auction companies out there too, some of their buyers are going back to, Iowa. They're shipping these cows back to Iowa where there's corn and feed available for those guys. Are you hearing from some of your buyers that they're not going to be able to take as much this year due to the drought in their area?
Well, the drought obviously is going to have a big effect on feed costs and carrying capacity. I would say it's maybe equally as much of a concern as the market is right now. Let's face it, there's not a whole lot of buyers that are just given this market and happy to do it and write that check and receive those cattle. Think about the risk involved in owning these things right now, the interest involved in owning these things at these levels. It's not all easy. And yeah, the drought is obviously a major concern in a lot of part of the country. And I think, Montana is starting to get this blanket of moisture a little bit that's going to hopefully sustain us kind of through these summer months and get us into the fall. What concerns me is the bred cow trade as we get into those fall marketing months. Where are we going to send these cows? Are we going to be able to trade enough of them around amongst ourselves within kind of this, Montana, some of the Dakotas region? But a lot of times we rely on some of those southern and Midwestern markets to uphold the bred cattle trade here in Montana. I'm wondering how those are going to look this fall with these drought conditions in some of these areas where there just flat is not going to be any feed. So I think it's one of those things, Andy, that we're just going to kind of have to take in stride, kind of at one step at a time. It sounds a little bit like a political answer, but we don't really know how to answer it until we kind of get right up to it. And that's one of those things we're going to have to get right up to, I think.
Well, let me ask you another philosophical question then that you certainly can give a political answer here if you want. I would if I were you, because New World screwworm has been in the news a lot lately, obviously, with it now in the U.S. and Texas and New Mexico. We hear from Canada this week that they're not going to be taking any cattle from affected states. What are you thinking there? What should we be telling these producers as we get ready to start getting into these video sale seasons with this concern of New World screwworm and countries like Canada saying we're not going to take cattle from states like Texas and affected areas?
I think this has to be addressed, Andy, and I'm going to answer as directly as I can here without being too political, because I don't think this is a political thing. This is a real animal health issue. It probably doesn't have a big impact on Montana cattle producers, all right? Yes, the horse industry is going to feel the impact of this. The cattle industry, we don't receive a lot of cattle out of the Texas area, right? Those cattle are generally going from here to those areas. So I don't know that there's going to be a direct negative impact on the Montana cattle industry. However, some of the requirements for bringing cattle into the state, especially out of those infested zones, will be official ID, will be an ICVI or a health inspection. Well, we already do that. I mean, we're used to doing that kind of stuff. We have brand laws here in the state of Montana. A lot of these protocols that we're starting to see from these other states, they're along the lines of what we're already doing. So I don't know that as Montanans, I don't know that we're going to have a whole lot of heartache with some of this because we're kind of used to doing this anyway. Now, those folks that are in Texas and Oklahoma, they're not used to doing some of that. So it's going to be very difficult. They're used to backing up a truck, loading cattle on it, and sending them to their destination. It's just a little bit different in our market area. I saw some headlines this week that were very disturbing and very misleading with regards to what's going on with screw worm and some of these requirements that are happening. And I'm just hoping that as an industry we can kind of just keep this thing pretty real. We have to address it. We have to take it seriously, but we can't panic about it.
We sure appreciate that insight, Kyle, and thanks again for joining us here today. Gonna wrap up our conversation. I got one last question, and I don't want a political answer from you. I'm going to give you a bad time for this, but next week, of course, Superior Livestock is hosting the Corn Belt Classic, but we'll also see the World Livestock Auctioneer Championship. Being a former world champion, and I need your prediction for the World Livestock Auctioneer competition. You don't have to throw any names if you don't have to.
Kyle, are you still there?
I am so excited for this to be in our area. The World Livestock Auctioneer Championship is an incredible event that brings the industry together in so many ways and spotlights, obviously, the top 31 livestock auctioneers from all around North America. There's something bigger about this, and celebrating the auction method, I think, is a big part of that. As far as predictions go, gosh, I mean, I'm scrolling through the list here, going, well, I mean, there are legitimately 31 guys that could walk away with that buckle next on Saturday, June 20th, and I think anybody that knows these gentlemen, anybody that's around the Livestock Marketing Association, will be thrilled with any one of these guys taking the keys to that truck and being the ambassador for our industry for the next year. There's an incredible amount of talent. I think we're represented very well from the northern areas, and I'm very proud of that. The fact that it's being hosted in the north, so to speak, at St. Ange, South Dakota, I think that's very, very exciting. We're going to get to showcase, cattle from this part of the world and showcase kind of what the industry is up here. When it comes to an auctioneer contest, guys, and you guys have been involved in these, Andy and Colton, you have for sure. These things they can be anybody's championship on any given day. And if you shuffle things up and you do it again the next day, you can have a completely different set of top teners that go to the finals and top three, just because the way things fall. At the end of the day, we got to remember it's the opinion of 10 judges, 5 in the interview, 5 in the live auction. It's the opinion of those people that are going to decide who that champion is. And so, what I say to the contestants is, go in with an attitude to win, but don't go in to win it. Go in to make friendships and to make some lifelong relationships in this business that are so crucial to a business that, that we're in is not so much the cattle business as it is the people business. And that goes for the commercial marketing side. That goes for the purebred marketing side of my business. This really is about connections and networking. And so for me, it was the WLAC that really helped fan that network out. And that has lent so well since we've come here to Lewistown to buy Lewistown livestock and become a part, an ownership part of the industry.
Well, we sure appreciate you taking time this week to visit with us, Kyle, and best of luck next week down at Sioux City, Nebraska. Well, I'm sure we'll be in touch and get some updates from you as the week goes on.
Sounds good, gentlemen. Colter, Colton, Andy, it's been enjoyable.
You bet. Thanks a bunch, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle. Well, as we get ready to go into our markets, we say thank you to Two Gun Western Apparel, serving agriculture and the Western lifestyle for all of your apparel needs. Everything is handcrafted, stitched, and made in Joliet, Montana. Give Cameron a call or visit twogunwesternapparel.com for all your Western apparel needs.
Well, I feel like I don't have anything very intelligent to say about the markets after listening to Kyle Shobe. He has just a wealth of information. Really appreciate Kyle coming on, but want to wrap up the episode, of course, looking at how our markets have shaken out. I mean, we've talked about the volatility that we've had just since the screw 'em announcement came out. As we're sitting right now with this recording, we've got August feeder cattle sitting at 354, live cattle for August at 241. So they've gained a little bit of money back here, but boy, we got to talk with Kyle about how good things look in central Montana. A lot of guys probably feeling a little bit jealous of that because I know it's not that way everywhere. We have seen drought have an effect, certainly on the way up market, but also these cow-calf pairs, more than I can remember seeing sell at this time of year. But thankfully, they're meeting pretty good prices. I mean, those young pairs, they'll easily bring over $5,000 right now.
It's been impressive for sure, and I think it just goes back again. You can't blame the producers right now for taking advantage of the opportunity in the marketplace, and we hate to see the drought conditions continue to grow, but it definitely was refreshing to hear Kyle talk about just the producer mentality in central Montana and how it's changed just in this last week.
I wonder if the folks of Wyoming and how they compare Sheridan to always having green grass, if Montana folks compare Lewistown.
I think so.
Probably.
Lewistown is the Sheridan, Wyoming, I guess.
It seems like it.
Either that or Dillon, maybe Beaverhead County would be up there.
County. Yeah. They'll get their share of the drought, though. But I feel like Lewistown just always looks so good. Same way Sheridan or Lodge grass, you drive through and the grass is just almost belt buckle high. Just jealous, you know. But the thing we did talk about a little bit with Kyle is, you know, are we going to grow this cow herd this year? And he mentioned just the return of optimism. But, boy, as we think of it from a more macro level, looking across the country, I just feel like those chances have dwindled so fast. And a little bit of moisture here will help us survive the year for sure, but I just don't think we're in a position to grow this cow herd. I mean, you look at how far the drought stretches, 8 out of the top 10 beef cow states in drought. It's expected to get a little better in the south and southeast part of the country as the summer wears on. North is forecast to stay dry, but I don't know. If I were a betting man, I would say we're going to just hold steady here.
I've been hearing that a lot, and what I've also been hearing in my travels is, where do I find hay? Where do I find grass for these cattle? And so that alone is going to be a big factor. I hope that this recent moisture that central Montana got was enough to at least put some of those cattle onto some pastures here for the first part of this summer, and that maybe that'll ease a little bit of the hay demand by just a touch, because I honestly think that it's just, I mean, I think producers are going to need just enough to just get by. If they can just hold on just long enough, that then they're going to be able to keep a hold of their herd as long as possible.
Well, I think guys are just playing the long game. When you get in that situation and you don't have the grass like so many of our listeners do right now, you focus on your core. You know, young up your herd, sell the old cows, do what you have to keep as much of the herd together, preserve that grass. It's a tough management decision to be in, but thank goodness you get to sell into a strong market. Most of the time when we've run into these bad droughts in past years, the market hasn't been there to help us make up. Well, we're excited to see what the Corn Belt Classic does next week. You know, last month we talked Northern Livestock Video held their sale. On that sale, 8-weight yearlings averaged $380, 5-weight steers at $530. So I'm not saying that's where the bar is, but the last time we had a video sale, that's what they brought. So it'll be exciting to watch.
See some of those midweight calves selling upwards of $5. That's impressive, nonetheless.
Yowzer. And next wanted to move a little more to the macro side and kind of the cattle feeding business, because one of the things we've seen with this exceptional market is carcass weights have trended substantially higher. No surprise, obviously. We still sell these cattle by the pound, and as long as they're going to pay this kind of money for them, we're encouraged to feed them to heavier and heavier weights. And actually, we have seen those carcass weights come down since the start of the year, really, where they were up to near 990 pounds in January. But you compare back to a year ago, and average carcass weights for the industry are up 34 pounds. Yep. So that's putting a lot more beef on the market and somewhat filling in for the lower amount of cattle we have. When you got 34 more pounds of beef for each one, that makes a difference.
Well, it's just fun to see, because I feel like we've talked about it, and before I even joined here at Northern Ag Network, we talked about seeing those increased carcass weights, and everyone was talking, okay, now we're feeding them to 1,100, 1,200. Well, now we're 1,400, 1,500, and see a 30-pound increase just in a year level. And now our beef production is still increasing year over year. It's impressive.
I know I need to talk to Paul Dykstra to see to get his perspective on this. But this week we've noticed also the box beef prices have a pullback in the spread. Lately, there was times that the select value, the lower grade of select value, was higher than the choice cutout values. And most of this year we've been seeing them hang within, $2 of each other. Just the select values have just been holding on strong. But now that spread $16 difference. And so it's just interesting to me to see how quickly that spread apart when we look at the choice cutouts and the select cutouts. And I don't know, maybe a wild speculation on my behalf here, unfounded completely, but is it because we're taking lighter weight carcasses? Is it because packers are saying, I'll take your 900 or your 1,000 pound or your 1,100 pound steer because I don't need the 1,400 pound. I'll take what I can get. And so that's, less marbling on these steers, and meaning that the select carcasses are coming up. I need to do a little more research and talk to somebody a lot smarter than me to figure that out. But interesting to see that spread go that far apart.
Yeah, you'll definitely need someone smarter than us to get to the bottom of that. I would guess that it has something to do with supply, but that would be interesting. The other thing I'll mention here on the cattle side, what's really helping these feed yards out, in addition to the excellent cash-fed cattle price, but cost of gain. We've seen these corn prices hold pretty steady, and so through the first third of the year, you've seen that cost of gain hover right around $1 a pound. That's likely to work up. I mean, we know we're going to have a pullback in corn acres. Where is that going to shake out? What are our stocks going to do? If that cost of gain goes up to $1.10, $1.15, feed yards are probably still profitable, but they're getting good weather in the Midwest right now, so that should encourage a good corn crop at least. And that kind of takes us to our next topic of looking at the grain market. Winter wheat harvest has actually started as we look towards the southern plains, Texas Panhandle, and Oklahoma. 11% of the U.S. winter wheat crop is harvested, which is about double the 5-year average. Not surprising knowing how fast this crop has come, and boy, we're hearing really high abandonment as well. So we're going to have a smaller winter wheat crop, and I think USDA's, if their numbers hold, it'll be the smallest wheat crop the U.S. has had since 1965.
Yeah, and we're under, I believe, if I recall right, Montana alone is under 5 million acres for wheat in general this year, so we're already talking about a small crop. But I guess, question for you, Colter, is it typical? Are we about 2 weeks behind normal in that southern part of the U.S. for harvest? Are they usually kicking off around the 1st of July, or when do they normally kick off?
That's a good question. I would say they're a little ahead of schedule, obviously. Probably 2 weeks, Andy?
Yeah, I'd say about 2 weeks ahead.
Because everybody I've been talking to, like here in Montana, talking about when they're going to start cutting hay, and everyone's like, it's probably going to be about 2 weeks earlier than normal. So I was taking a rough guess that's about what we're seeing, and I'm assuming we'll probably see that trend kind of carry through up north.
Yeah. So we've got that tough-looking winter wheat crop. USDA says nationally it's rated 46% poor to very poor, but spring crops looking a lot better. We talk about the corn conditions. Spring wheat nationally is rated 52% good to excellent, although most of that is kind of eastern North Dakota and into Minnesota. The Montana spring wheat is just 10% good to excellent. So the story's not over, obviously. The recent rain that we saw is probably going to save some spring crops, honestly, especially up north where they did get over 4 inches of rain. But we gotta keep that on. We can't have the spigot shut off just yet. And one other thing on the market side of that standpoint, I think these favorable crop conditions in the Midwest have served to pull on the wheat and bring it down a little bit. Since USDA come out with that crop production report that said we were going to have such a small crop this year, we've seen the wheat market drop $1.35. Winter wheat.
Wow. It seems it's been very reliant on those pressures on the row crop side for sure. So hopefully there's some relief, good conditions there to kind of keep the spark alive. I think last time I looked, they were up a few cents today in the wheat contracts, but hopefully we can gain some of that back for sure.
Yeah, to be silver lining, I guess when the price of U.S. wheat comes down, it makes us more competitive on the export market. That's not exactly good news to anyone, but it helps us to work through some stocks, I guess. And certainly we're still watching the situation in Iran. They keep sounding like it's imminent to reopen the Strait of Hormuz permanently. And
I've yet to see it. It's been a month now since we've been talking about that. But
And then the other thing, I mean, you guys are reading it as well, but what happens in the southern hemisphere? Yeah. Seems like there's going to be less wheat down there this year, largely related to the challenge getting fertilizer. So that could be a driver for us. It's probably much longer term than this year's crop. It's probably more of a 2027 thing.
Yeah, I think we talked about it before here on Extra Country, but Australia already predicting a 26% decrease in their wheat production, and that's just one area. So yeah, it's gonna be huge, and maybe it's time to buy, if you can, buy some grain bins and and store that wheat as long as possible. But because I don't know, this could mean that we could see higher prices coming through the end of the year and into next, hopefully.
That is a dangerous prospect, Andy, to say just store that wheat.
That is Andy Schwab. You can reach him at 307. No, but that brings up a good point, Colter. I think we're still in the middle of the conversation of the Strait of Hormuz being shut down. We've seen some immediate pressure, obviously, on the board, but these are long-term effects that we're going to see because, as the U.S., we get a fair amount of fertilizer from there. You're not going to see that in a 2 to 3 month swing. That's going to have a year and a half effect. So I think that's just a time will tell conversation for sure.
Yep, and we'll be watching these USDA reports real closely. We've got, of course, WASDE and crop production coming out. End of June is the big acreage report that we watch extremely closely, and boy, we hope we're going to get a little help out of this. But the volatility we've seen in this market, especially since the conflict in Iran, I mean, for a while there, these wheat prices were running. But right now, this is looking on a cash basis across Montana. 14 Pro spring wheat price from $5.20 to $5.55 roughly. That's under last year's levels. This time a year ago, we were probably 25 to 50 cents higher. But the winter wheat is still above a year ago because of what we're seeing nationally. So most of your 12 Pro winter wheat would be priced from $5.15 to $5.60. Unfortunately, Durham just hasn't moved much this year. We're probably 70 to 85 cents under where the market was this year. Most of Durham right now is going to be priced from $5.40 to $6.15. So there's still time to get a little more help out of these crop prices. And boy, a lot of questions. Keep the rain coming, though. If we can see another couple inches of rain, that'll see us through.
I'm sure that's going to be the conversation as you guys head up next week to Kalispell for the Montana Farm Bureau Federation Conference. Looking forward to their summer convention, of course. Next Year Country, you guys will get some interviews and get some insight from there in Kalispell, so we're looking forward to that. But that's going to wrap us up for another week here on Next Year Country. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to like and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a comment on what you enjoyed, what you appreciated. We'd love your feedback. Colter, Andy, thanks again, guys. It's been another good episode.
Yeah, I would just ask people, please comment and help Colton come out with a better name than Banter Brothers and Speculating
I'm going to talk with Cam
help,
at
folks.
Two Gun Western. We're going to get Banter Brother T-shirts and carry these to all the conventions.
A big thank you, though, to Kyle Shobe for taking the time to join us as well today. Is always great to hear from Kyle and everybody in the industry as well.
You bet. That's going to wrap up another episode of Next Year Country. For Colter Brown and Andy Schwab, I'm Colton Young. We'll see you next time.